and you would put it on the PC itself. So you put it from the Commodore drive, 1541, 1571, 1581, and so forth. IEEE drives, out of luck. Right? There's no ability to convert those disks over to the PC. The problem with parallel ports is they are going the way of the dodo bird, right? There's very few, I won't say no, but there's very few new PCs that come with a parallel port. In fact, extremely rare to find a new laptop that comes with one at all, and desktops most likely don't come with it, but you could probably buy a card and put in. But the key is even when you do have a parallel port, you have a big issue with the operating system. X1541 cables, even in their latest incarnations, were not designed for multitasking operating systems. They were designed for operating systems like DOS, where they could completely take over the hardware and do the low-level signaling that was necessary to talk to this drive. Well, that's no longer possible because most people, in fact, I would dare say no one, uses DOS or any operating system like that anymore. Everybody's using Windows. Some people don't even use a PC. They use Mac, or they use OS X on their Mac, or they're running something on Linux, using the Intel environment, but they're running Linux. Good point. So the key is something new was needed. And so last year, Nate Lawson, who's been working on this project for a while, came up with a solution that uses a microcontroller, which is sitting on the back here, the little black blob at the back on this board. This board, or this functionality, allows you to connect a 1541, 1571, 1581 drive using USB. So all the machines today have USB, so you can plug it in and you can transfer data. In addition, at the time, just as part of a future ability, when I laid out, because I did the board work for this particular device, I laid out the signals for the IEEE connector that you see connected on this board right here, the IEEE 488 connector, even though the firmware did not support that at the time. Mid-year this year, IEEE support was added to the firmware, and so now all the boards come optionally with the IEEE connector, not only populated, but useful as well. The key here is you have USB connectivity, you have 1541 drive, 1571, or any of the PET type drives, 4040, 8050, and whatnot. So I'm going to show you one of the drives. I've got it set up here. That drive right there is set up, and I'm going to bring up the, it uses a set of programming functionality called, let's get this up here. There we go. Have a set of functionality called OpenCBM. It used to be called CBM for Linux, and then it was renamed to OpenCBM, and it's been extended to support non-Linux machines. This uses that functionality. So here we're going to do a D64 copy, drive 8 to a D64 image. So you'll see the little light going on the unit, and you'll see what's on the screen coming up. So here you go. And so if you've got disks that you need to archive, or conversely, you want to take your images and turn them back into disks, this will transfer both ways. And I'm not doing the stopwatch right here, but you're transferring an entire 170K worth of data relatively quickly. If you need faster operation, this Zoom Floppy device supports the parallel cables that were popular back in the day, as well as the newer style parallel cables that use like a DB15 connector on both sides, and then have the 8-bit parallel path soldered or socketed on the Commodore 1541.
And presumably the IEEE would be faster too?
Correct, IEEE would be faster. If you have a drive. If you are so blessed with a 50-pound floppy drive, now you have something else to do with it besides weigh down your boat, right? Although I would recommend doing all your transfers of your data before you use it as the boat. Anyway, the whole bunch of utilities here. I'm not going to go through and talk about all the utilities. We're almost done here. 35. There we go. we've got a D64 image. So now if I have Vice, I can go into Vice and I can load that D64 image and I can do whatever I want with it. So if it's my favorite utility, I can play with it on X64 or whatever you want to do. This comes in handy if you want to convert your disks and then you want to copy them over to an SD card, like using a micro IC, and you want to use them back on your Commodore. So you may still want to run it on a Commodore, but you don't want the physical media anymore. You just want the image, and you want to put it on a flash disk, and you want to use it that way. Another thing that can be done that has never been able to be done before is, used to be if you wanted parallel operation or you wanted to nibble disks or whatever, the only option you had at your disposal was to use the parallel cable. Parallel cables require that you open up the disk drive and you physically solder to the pins on the 6522, or you create a socket and you solder to the, it uses an unused 8-bit port on the VIA chip in the 1541 or the 1571. You have to do that. With this solution, not being a parallel-based solution and whatnot, and the speed that's available through USB, we now have the ability to transfer disks using the burst mode that's available on the 1571 and 1581. So if you have a 1571 or a 1581 drive, you could transfer disks at the nibble, the faster rate, achieving parallel transfer functionality, but no parallel cable is required. You just need to have a disk drive that's capable of doing SRQ or burst mode. The other advantage to there is the 1571D, which is the disk drive that's in the cost-reduced 128, so the metal-cased 128, has no ability to use a parallel cable. The port that was available on the previous drives was cost-reduced out of the board design completely. So therefore, there is no way to add a parallel cable to that particular drive. Now there's a way to use that drive at its fastest rate. Obviously, I talked about IEEE support. There's other things. The top of the board here has an expansion connector. There's an individual by the name of Arn Mint who has developed a tape read and write set of routines. So if you have a tape drive, there'll soon be a card that can plug into the top here, have a little tape connector on top of it, and you can plug your 1530 data set or 1531 data set into there, or C2N data set, and you can transfer your tape back and forth. Now, mind you, over in the States and Canada, it's probably not all that prevalent. In Europe, a lot of games, a lot of stuff was transmitted and that was distributed via tape. So tape is very prevalent over there, and so that's a big additional item. There's still plenty of room to support things. The next iteration of it is something I'm going to show you. I'm going to lift it up, and then I'll try to get it to work if I haven't ruined anything on the way over here. But this is nice, this is great, but it's big, it's bulky, and a lot of people ask, can you shrink this down in size so that I can put it in my 1541 directly? And the answer is, sure. So, what I'm currently doing, and you'll have to put on your little imagination hats, which you may not have been able to put on for a few years, but I'll give you ability to do that. This, I'm going to flip it up here so it's easier. This right here is the prototype of what's called the micro Zoom Floppy. Now, it's obviously not very micro right now. But the idea is this chip that's in the middle, right here, the big chip that's on the board, is the 6522 VIA chip. It holds all the IEC signals, the ones that are normally exposed via the IEC cable, the serial cable. It also exposes those 8 valuable pins for data transfer, the parallel data transfer pins. The idea is, once the firmware is completed, the idea is the functionality of this card, namely this chip on the back and one other IC, will be created on a small board that will sit underneath that chip. So the only thing that you'll see is the chip itself, and right underneath it will be the board. And the board will have those 2 integrated circuits on it. And then the only other thing that will have it on it is a connector, which will go to the back of the unit right here, right here, and you'll have a USB connection. Now, with this in place, the way the system will be set up is you will have a USB connector on the back of your 1541 or 1571 or 81 drive. You will plug the USB into there, so you'll plug this connector into the back of your drive, plug it into your computer, but then you will also plug, or not, depending on what you want to do, but you'll have the ability to plug an IEC cable into your disk drive and plug it into your Commodore. When your disk drive is not being used by the PC, it will be available to be used by the Commodore machine. So therefore, you can have both computers hooked up to the same drive. Obviously, you can't use the disk from both of them exactly at the same time. But if you want to transfer data to the disk drive from your Commodore and then immediately load it up on the PC, you can do that. It will work for both functions at the same time. The other one is the IEC cable is strictly optional. You don't have to have it on there. So the only thing you'll need in order to copy files off of your 1541 drive or 7181 drive will be a USB cable and a power cable. It will all be self-contained inside the drive. And so I'm going to plug it in right here, and we'll see whether oh, here we go. Is it turning? So it's powered by the drive itself. So we'll see if we can. Has it got a disk in it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, good. So we'll call this the something test.d64. Whoops. There we go. No IEC cable. Whoops.
Does it also make G64 images?
The nibbler routines will. The nibbler function will. Oops.
So either if you're hooked up to a 71 or you have a parallel.
Okay, that's fine. Here I figured it. It got mad at me because I did too many things at once. Okay. There we go. So, now it's running. I don't know whether it's, it may be that disk is bad. Huh?
Let's try to access.
I may need to get the other disk. I stole the disk. I think I swapped disks here. This is the one I've been using.
Oh, this is the disk you're having trouble with.
Yep, the disk I was having trouble with.
I guess you know it's bad now.
Huh?
You guess you know it's bad now.
I do. I know it's bad.
Free drive.
Yep, it's a bad disk. Bad disk. That'll be interesting. When people start turning on their disk drive and it suddenly recognizes as a USB device in here. So let's see. There we go. Okay. Yep, that disk has had it. So you know what? When you have a disk that looks like somebody took a... Wow. Isn't that just... You know what that is, right? Somebody was like... They snipped it with the paper punch and they put it in. It's like it wouldn't work as a flippy or turned it over and over. So they snipped it again. Look how bad they had to get it. So
That's cathartic.
huh? Yeah, it's like, I hate you. Okay.
This is transferring at parallel speed.
No.
This is transferring still at serial speed, but when I get the board finished, it will have parallel transfer capabilities as well.
So as also be compatible with GFIDOS and stuff?
It'll be compatible, yeah, just as compatible as the current unit. Zoom Floppy doesn't care whether you have any kind of disk enhancement in your drives at all because it uses its own transfer routines. So there's no penalty to having GFIDOS, but there's no requirement to have GFIDOS or anything like that in the machine or in the drive.
So as it stands right now, it does support 1581 in burst mode.
Yes. Supports 1581 in burst mode and 1571.
Now-
Anything with burst mode.
Could I write to a 1541 disk on a single-sided disk in burst mode? Is that possible? Or
Right to a what? I'm sorry.
like a single-sided 1541 disk on a 1571 in burst mode?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. The drive can do, it can do.
Yes. You're right. And the drive, remember, it takes over, so it doesn't care about how the.
You know, I always thought the 1571, when it drops to read a 1541 format disk, single-sided, doesn't run in burst mode. But I'm not 100% sure.
It could, but I think you had to. In the 128 mode, if you put a 1541 disk in there, it would still, because that's a transfer.
Still in
thing.
71
Yeah, it's still in 71 mode.
Yeah,
So
it's like a command to make
that's right.
Right.
The key was if you were in a 64 mode on the 128 and you tried, 64 didn't know anything about burst command, so it would drop down into.
Yeah, and then you had to run a special command to get it to run.
Right.
Double-sided.
Yeah, but you couldn't do burst routines because burst routines required those extra kernel
Yeah.
functions which were not available in the 64 DOS or 64 kernel.
Right.
But this doesn't care, so it'll write those disks just fine. Single-sided, double-sided. Now what it won't do, because the drive won't do it, is you can't write the flippy side.
No, you have to flip it.
You'd have to flip it and then write it on top. So you still have that, that's just a physical limitation of the drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the existing Zoom, is there anything support from Vice coming in, so you could have the drive hooked into your PC and use it as a drive for Vice?
Vice supports that right now.
It does.
Yes, it does.
With Zoom Floppy, or?
With Zoom Floppy, yes. Yeah, so now when you start asking about exactly how to do it, I would say you need to contact the Vice folks. They have incorporated open CBM support, and so by extension, Zoom Floppy works, and I know folks on the mailing list have do it with Vice, but I don't know all the magic commands that you need to do in order to, it's not that many, it's just some sort of setup you need to do on Vice in order to use a real drive using Zoom Floppy.
Cool.
Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
Well, it's not so much a question, just like you mentioned that there are also graphical front ends for these tools.
Oh, that's right.
So if you're scared of P64 copy and all this, there are graphical front ends. There's one called CBM Expert, Steve Gray at the EPUB.
That's right.
And I think it's Disk Imagery 64, so Linux and Mac OS. Gives you this functionality without having
Yeah, and I probably ought to, I'm sure those are more photogenic than the command line options. The key is this is where, before anything else of those can work, this has to work, so this is what we normally test with, so that,
This is still pretty slick.
huh?
This is still pretty slick.
Well, I think, it can be very mundane, like kernel cartridges, you're getting what? A kernel, well, you already had a kernel. And like, transferring disks, something I've been able to do for what, about 30 years. But the key is the ability to use it with newer technology, the ability to have this additional functionality. Like I said, IEEE support was not available until Zoom Floppy provided that capability. So all those, I have a lot of people purchasing them. Most people who buy them just want to archive their own personal disk. I've got Geos files, I've got GeoWrite this, I've got some programs I wrote way back in the day, blah, 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 blah. I want a Zoom Floppy to do that. But a large number of people that are buying the units now I have these pet disks. And I am just really worried about these pet disks because I first wrote these disks in 1979, And so that's extremely, that's right at, if not beyond the age of a disk, really. And so they're saying, I want to try this. I want to try and get as much data off these disks as well because they will not last another decade. So, and there's a lot of pet software that's not been archived up to this point because this device didn't exist. Yes.
Can I go back and ask an easy flash question?
Sure.
You may want to put this in big letters in a fax somewhere.
Okay.
Is there going to be a clock port? And if not, why not?
Okay. I don't know. I didn't see one on the final PCB.
Right.
But
once you take up the cartridge port, for the past 10 whatever years, that's been, well, why shouldn't you put a clock port on that?
I will talk to the designer and see whether there's clock port capability there.
Unrelated to his question,
Yes.
but an easy flash question.
Yes.
Larger cartridge images, like you said something about 32 or 16 or 32K images. What about a 256K image?
Yes, Persia's a huge image.
Would that occupy multiple slots? Slots like I noticed here.
It must. It will occupy multiple slots because there's a limit to how much flash ROM is available on that.
Right. There was a cartridge version of Double Dragon, and I think it's 256K as well.
Yeah, you probably don't. You wouldn't want to try and load 8 of those onto the
Right,
unit.
no.
Luckily, I don't think there's that many of those
I think there's
majorly long. I would say, there'll be. I'm hedging the bets on the conversation just a little bit because the design has been because the design is to a certain extent downloaded to the card. Down like I said through the USB port. Thomas has been kind of deciding which features because he's got the key that's limiting him is there's a 144 macro cell CPLD on the board. So whatever you want to do has to fit in 144 essentially cells, right? And those cells, it's just a number, but the key is that's the limit. But the question is, how can you restructure things to support as many features as possible with that limit? But you can do that after the hardware has been produced. So the hardware is strictly defined by that program that's loaded in there. So he's been adding capability on there. I know he has multiple large cartridge capability, but to somebody in the back's noting, expanded RAM and whatnot. Now, it has some RAM on board, and it does have more RAM than the 8K that it needs. So that is a functionality that can be exposed, but there are limits.
But a ROM cartridge is just that, it's just ROM, right? Like you can't take the functionality of this and turn it into a RAM cartridge.
No, you can't, but the key on ROM cartridges, most people when they think of a ROM cartridge, they think of, oh hey, there is a ROM, it sits at this address space, and that's the end of it. But like Prince of Persia, that's a 256K ROM, it's banked in. So there's, it'll put a little bit of code in one spot, and it'll go to that code and it'll say, okay, bank in another chunk of ROM. Well, the key is supporting that requires additional functionality in the cartridge, because it's no longer just a one-to-one mapping. Any other questions? Obviously, I have Zoom Floppies here today. The Easy Flash, I said, is probably going to be first quarter, and the Micro Zoom Floppy as well is going to be probably first quarter. Yeah.
The micro Zoom floppy, is that going to be, which drives do you think that's going to be available for?
All the 1541s are going to work. The 1571s and 1571D will also work because there'll be a line over to the SRQ to do parallel transfers. The 1581 still undecided on that one. So the 1541 and the 1571 support will be there, but 81 is still up in the air. So obviously FD and those kind of drives, probably not. You'll probably just need a regular Zoom Floppy for those. The other caveat is the Zoom Floppy, the Micro Zoom Floppy will work for that drive and that drive only. So like if you want one interface and you want it to support all the drives you own, then you want this unit. If you want to have a 1541-2 or something that you can take with you and plug it into USB, then Micro Zoom Floppy would be a good option for you. Or conversely, I have had some people that say, well, that's okay, Jim, because I'm going to buy one of these. They'll probably sell for $20, $30. I'm going to buy one for every drive I have because I want to have a USB connector on every one of my drives, and I want to plug them all into a hub, and I want to plug them all into my PC. And I'm like, well, okay. I guess I like that. Yes.
If you're going to have like one sort of like model for each drive,
No, there'll be one model for all of them. The same model will work for all drives.
really?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it just sits between the VIA chip and
Yeah, it sits on the VIA chip, and its VIA chip is mapped in the same place with the same pins on all the drives.
Okay. What about the Accelerator Plus? Because that's
The-
a drive that, it's a really reliable drive that a lot of people still use.
If you want an Accelerator Press, I would recommend this. I'm not necessarily, if it works, great, but I'm not going to target the Accelerator Press. For that, I feel like this solution that we already have is something. The other one with the Accelerator Press and the FSD drives and whatnot, there's only so much, a lot of them put the chips right underneath the case,
Yeah.
and there's no room to add anything else. Like when I do Jiffy DOS chips for the FSDs and whatnot, if I didn't have special low profile chips, they wouldn't even fit in there. So I think the chances that it's actually physically going to fit in that drive is slim. So I would recommend something like this. The key is, and as I talked to Nate when we were putting this together, because he said, why don't we just cost reduce it and put it right in the drive from the beginning? And I said, no. We were talking about it, and I said, no, I think we'd rather do this, because this will support all the drives, right? This other unit will support a subset of the drives in a more elegant way, but it's not going to be a 100% coverage. It's not going to be something that covers all use cases, whereas this covers many more use cases.
And like you said, though, the first version, you could have a 71, a 41, an 81
Yes.
all together on one device.
Correct.
Which is pretty convenient.
It is. So if you've got a whole setup and you want to just have one there, I figure people are going to have that, and they'll probably have a favorite drive that they'll have the Micro Zoom Floppy in, and they'll use that. So I'm probably over on time, so I appreciate
Yeah.
you guys standing here. I know. See, get me gabbing, and there you go. See, all right.